You just lost $1,500 this year, and the government desperately hopes you never figure out why. You swipe your debit card for basic, everyday groceries, and somehow it feels like you are paying for luxury fine dining. Your utility bills are climbing, your car insurance is skyrocketing, and your rent is quietly bleeding you dry. Politicians proudly stand at their podiums and call it strategic economic policy, but the International Monetary Fund's latest forecast points right at the actual culprit. It is a massive, unvoted-on pay cut that you never agreed to. Bureau of Labor Statistics data confirms that this is not a temporary glitch. Inflation is being structurally hardwired into your everyday life. Today, we are exposing how U.S. tariffs act as a brutal hidden tax, how they're quietly draining your bank account, and exactly how to build a defensive personal finance strategy to protect your money before the geopolitical landscape shifts again in 2027. Let us get one massive, ridiculous lie out of the way right now. When politicians throw around aggressive buzzwords like trade wars and domestic protection, they loudly promise that foreign countries are footing the bill. They want you to picture foreign leaders writing massive checks to the United States Treasury. That is completely mathematically false. Foreign governments do not pay U.S. tariffs. You pay U.S. tariffs. A tariff is not a penalty on a foreign nation. A tariff is simply a tax applied to a product the moment it crosses the border into the United States, and that entire cost gets passed directly to you. Imagine a shipping container full of everyday household goods landing at the port of Los Angeles. The foreign factory already got their money. It's the American importer who has to write a check to the government just to get their own cargo off the dock. And do you think that importer is just going to absorb that massive loss? Absolutely not. To see exactly how this works, you do not need a degree in economics. You just need to listen to real-world corporate earnings calls. Executives at massive appliance manufacturers and global tech companies are not even trying to hide it from their investors. They state flat out that tariffs on imported steel, raw aluminum, and specialized microchips force them to raise the retail price of your new washing machine by 20%. You look at your receipts at the big box store and you think corporate greed is just wildly out of control, but you are completely missing the invisible hand digging into your back pocket. Economic data shows this current tariff landscape translates to an absolute loss of up to $1,500 per year per household. Think about what that money actually represents. That is a substantial mortgage payment. That is 3 entire months of groceries for a small family, instantly wiped out and transferred to the government without your permission. To understand why this happens so automatically, we have to look at a core economic concept called full pass-through. That sounds complicated, but simply put, it means the entire cost of a new government tax is shoved directly onto your shoulders. Think of the global supply chain exactly like a relay race. The foreign manufacturer runs their lap and hands the baton to the U.S. importer. But at the border, the government steps onto the track and slaps a heavy, invisible weight onto that baton. The importer hands that heavier baton to the regional distributor. The distributor hands it to the local retailer. The retailer panics about their shrinking profit margins and tosses that incredibly heavy baton directly into your shopping cart. You are the finish line. You are the one left holding the weight. And the real shocker is where you are actually paying this ultimate price. It is not just on luxury items or flat-screen televisions. This hidden tax has violently infected the core services you desperately need to survive. How does a massive tariff on foreign steel suddenly make your routine doctor visit more expensive? Because modern medicine relies heavily on imported technical tools, specialized diagnostic beds, and medical-grade metals. When hospitals are forced to pay heavily taxed prices just to equip a basic exam room, they do not accept lower profit margins out of the goodness of their hearts. They immediately raise your copay, they bill your insurance provider more, and then your insurance provider drastically jacks up your monthly premiums. The exact same devastating math applies to your rent. Real estate developers and construction companies pay heavily taxed prices for imported Canadian lumber, foreign copper wiring, and overseas cement. Because of tariffs, the baseline cost to build a simple apartment complex skyrockets before they even pour the foundation. To keep their investors happy, the developer sets your baseline monthly rent significantly higher just to break even on those inflated construction costs. Tariffs do not just tax random luxury goods, they aggressively tax your basic survival. Right now, the Federal Reserve is operating on what monetary economists call the look-through theory. That sounds complicated, but simply put, it means the deeply powerful people in charge of the economy are intentionally ignoring these tariff-induced price spikes. The Federal Reserve absolutely knows that tariffs are artificially raising the cost of your groceries and housing, but instead of fixing the core problem, they are just looking right through the data. They treat these price spikes as temporary political noise. They have collectively decided that it is infinitely easier to let you, personally, carry the agonizing burden of higher prices than it is for them to disrupt the popular political narrative in Washington. You are literally acting as the financial shock absorber for the United States government. Zooming out to the global stage, the International Monetary Fund's stark red alert warning makes perfect sense. Constant, unpredictable uncertainty around trade policy is causing major economy-driving business investment to completely stall out. Companies are absolutely terrified about what the trade rules will be next month, let alone next year, so they just freeze. This creates what market analysts call the uncertainty trap. That sounds complicated, but simply put, it means when businesses cannot confidently predict the future, they completely stop spending money on growth and start hoarding cash in the bank. They stop expanding factories. They stop hiring new employees. They stop giving out meaningful annual raises. This paralyzing fear drags the entire macroeconomic engine to a grinding halt, and your personal career growth is the very first casualty. This macroeconomic freeze makes the old traditional financial advice of wait and see incredibly dangerous. For the last decade, standard financial advice was to simply ride out the storm. If new cars are drastically overpriced, just wait a year until the market cools off. If housing is too expensive, wait for the inevitable correction. Listen to me very carefully. That strategy is dead. We are dealing with structural, hardwired inflation driven by unyielding international trade law. We are dealing with a phenomenon called mean reversion failure. That sounds complicated, but simply put, it means the old comforting belief that what goes up must eventually come down is no longer true. The baseline price for survival has permanently moved higher. This permanent shift completely shatters historically popular financial strategies like coast fire. That sounds complicated, but simply put, it means investing aggressively early in your life until your portfolio is big enough to just coast to retirement, allowing you to quit the rat race and take a low-stress, low-paying job just to cover your basic living expenses. But structural, tariff-driven inflation absolutely destroys this plan. If your basic, unavoidable cost of living spikes by $1,500 a year entirely because of hidden government taxes, the total amount of money you actually need to coast goes through the roof. You are violently forced to stay in your high-stress corporate job years longer than you planned, all because the government quietly and permanently degraded your purchasing power. Before we can actually fix this massive problem for your own wallet, we desperately need to destroy two massive, heavily protected political myths. First, the revenue myth. The government absolutely loves to stand in front of microphones and brag that tariffs have successfully raised an additional $214 billion for the country. But due to massive, legally required refund liabilities to major corporate importers, the government actually only raised a tiny, pathetic fraction of that number. They effectively set your household monthly budget on fire just to collect what amounts to a meaningless rounding error in the grand scheme of the federal budget. Then there's the deeply manipulative employment paradox. That sounds complicated, but simply put, it means the false political promise that taxing foreign goods will magically force massive corporations to build factories in your hometown and hire millions of American workers. The hard, undeniable economic research proves this is completely and utterly false. The net national employment impact of these tariffs is basically zero. Massive manufacturing companies just use this protective government bubble to aggressively raise their own retail prices. Since foreign competition is taxed out of the market, domestic companies have a monopoly on your wallet, and they pocket the massive difference as pure, unrestricted executive profit. Think of the overall economy like a massive cargo ship caught in a brutal hurricane. To stabilize the vessel, the wealthy captain orders the crew to throw the cargo overboard. But that cargo is your personal purchasing power. Your ability to buy your first home or afford a sudden medical emergency or send your kids to college is completely sacrificed just to keep their political ship afloat. So what do you actually do about this? You are one person. You cannot march into Washington and rewrite international trade law. But you absolutely can control your own personal balance sheet. You can build a fortress around your own money. Here is the exact tactical financial playbook for surviving and thriving in this new normal. Step 1. Defensive budgeting. You need to take your traditional, comfortable monthly budget and throw it in the trash. $400 today buys significantly fewer actual calories than it did just 6 short months ago. You must aggressively rank every single line item in your budget by its direct exposure to structural inflation. You must ruthlessly cut the heavy, useless dead weight from the bottom of your budget to properly fund the rapidly rising survival costs at the top. When you go to the grocery store, you must stop paying the invisible marketing tax on premium brand name items. Switch to store brand generics for every single household staple. If the brand name allergy medication is $18 and the exact same chemical generic right next to it is $4, paying that extra $14 is no longer a fun, harmless luxury. It is a direct, measurable attack on your own financial stability. Step 2. Defensive investing. If you have any significant amount of cash sitting in a traditional legacy big bank checking account earning almost 0% interest, you're actively losing wealth every single second of the day. If the money you saved is not mathematically beating the rate of inflation, you are guaranteed to get poorer over time. You need to avoid falling victim to spread arbitrage. That sounds complicated, but simply put, it means the big banks are using your financial laziness to legally steal your wealth. They take the cash sitting in your checking account, use it to buy 5% government treasury bills, and keep all the profit for themselves while tossing you pennies. Stop letting them do this. Move your vital, hard-earned emergency fund into a highly competitive money market fund, or directly into short-term treasury bills that actually fight back against inflation. For your long-term retirement portfolio, start looking into resilient asset classes that can absorb these inflation shockwaves, like consumer staples, essential utilities, or healthcare. Why? Because those are the exact necessary industries that possess the ruthless pricing power to pass their rising costs along. Do not let the massive banking institutions use your money to get rich while your personal purchasing power melts away like an ice cube on a hot sidewalk. Step 3. Strategic consumption. This is exactly where you beat the rigged system by buying ahead of the coming volatility. If you know for an absolute fact that your commuter car needs new tires sometime in the next 6 months, buy them today. Rubber imports are massively exposed to these ongoing tariff wars. Stop foolishly waiting for seasonal holiday sales that are mathematically never going to happen. You need to practice inflationary hedging. That sounds complicated, but simply put, it means buying the crucial items you know you will definitely need tomorrow at today's much cheaper prices. On the flip side of that exact same coin, you must violently delay any non-essential technology upgrades. The global electronics markets are absolute ground zero for international tariff wars. Keep your current smartphone and your aging laptop alive for as long as physically possible, because needlessly replacing them right now means paying a massive, unnecessary premium directly to the government. And you genuinely need to lock this aggressive defensive strategy in immediately. What exactly happens to your wallet if these tariffs expand in 2027? Current aggressive political rhetoric across the board is pointing directly toward universal baseline tariffs. That sounds complicated, but simply put, it means a heavy, inescapable blanket tax on literally everything imported into the United States. Imagine trying to buy a standard commuter car when the structural steel, the computer microchips, the rubber tires, and the plastic interior all face an additional 10 or 20% penalty at the border.
If that apocalyptic scenario happens, the $1,500 hit your bank account took this year is going to look like a gentle, friendly warm-up. If you lazily wait until 2027 to aggressively manage your personal assets, you will be buying in at the absolute top of the worst market in history. You need to position your personal finances defensively right now. At the end of the day, these massive billion-dollar tariffs are not just abstract, boring policy papers floating around the halls of Washington. They are not just debate topics for talking heads on cable news. They are very real, very heavy weights dropping directly onto your personal financial future. Whether you are aggressively trying to reach absolute financial independence or you are just desperately trying to keep your head above water to feed your family, the fundamental rules of the economic game have changed permanently. You cannot control the chaotic global supply chain, and you certainly cannot control the ego-driven geopolitical posturing that results in a $1,500 hidden tax on your everyday life. But you can wake up. You can stop acting like the stable, predictable economy of 2019 is magically coming back to save you. The comfortable financial strategy of the last decade simply no longer applies to the brutal economic world we live in today. Protect your purchasing power with everything you have. Stop paying for expensive brand name illusions. Weaponize your hard-earned savings to violently outpace structural inflation. Treat every single dollar that leaves your bank account like a highly trained soldier fighting for its absolute value in a hostile environment. The massive bureaucratic system expects you to blindly absorb these crushing costs as their quiet, obedient, uncomplaining shock absorber. It is time to prove them absolutely wrong. Look at your monthly budget tonight. Identify 3 heavily exposed expenses you can substitute immediately and move your resting cash into a high-yield vehicle that actually fights back. Do not sit around waiting for the government to fix your wallet. Take aggressive, permanent control of it yourself.